Dark Souls is full of ruined kingdoms, and each one left behind its own knights. Today, we are going to talk about every major knight order in the series, the lands they served, the battles they fought, and the fate that eventually consumed them. Some guarded gods, some defended kings, and some kept carrying out their duty long after their world had already fallen. The Baldur Knights. The Baldur Knights came from the human kingdom of Baldur. Their king was Night King Rendal, a ruler famous enough to become part of legend. When the undead curse spread through Baldur, the kingdom collapsed into ruin. Rendal then led his remaining knights to Lordran, hoping to reach Anor Londo and find a way to end the curse by restoring the fading fire. They made it as far as Sen's fortress, but none of them could overcome the Iron Golem. Their mission failed, Rendal died, and the Baldur Knights hollowed, leaving them scattered through the undead parish and Sen's fortress as the remains of a pilgrimage that never reached its goal. The Berenike Knights. The Berenike Knights were known for brute force, heavy steel armor, and huge iron tower shields. Their style was direct and crushing. They were praised for enormous strength, and their weapons reflected that reputation. Black Iron Tarkus came from their ranks, and even among Berenike Knights, he stood apart because his black iron gear was so heavy that few could have worn it at all. The group represents one of the clearest examples of a Dark Souls knight order built around raw physical dominance. Their lore is lighter than Baldur or Anor Londo, but their identity is very clear. Massive bodies, extreme defense, and overwhelming force. The Silver Knights. The Silver Knights are among the oldest and most important knight orders in the entire series. Gwyn created this army in the Age of the Gods, and they fought in the war against the dragons at the beginning of the Age of Fire. In Dark Souls, they stand as the elite defenders of Anor Londo. Their shields and armor carry divine associations, and one item description states that they remained in Anor Londo to defend the illusory goddess after Gwyn departed to link the fire. Even long after the city declined, their presence continued. By Dark Souls 3, ancient Silver Knights still guard the remains of Anor Londo inside Irithyll, showing how their duty survived long after the glory of the gods had faded. The Black Knights. The Black Knights began as Silver Knights. Their identity changed during Gwyn's final march. They followed him when he departed to link the fire, and during that event, they were burned and blackened by the newly kindled flame. Their long war against chaos demons also became part of their image, which is why they carry strong fire resistance and are often tied to the collapse of Izalith and the demon threat. After Gwyn's sacrifice, they did not return as a stable order guarding a kingdom. They became wandering remnants, disembodied and burned, spread across the world in ruined strongholds, old battlefields, and the path leading to the kiln. The Silver Knights represent the royal army of the gods at its height. The Black Knights represent that same army after it passed through fire and lost its place in the world. The Darkwraith Knights. The Darkwraiths are a fallen knight order from New Londo. They were once the knights of the Four Kings, and their transformation came after the kings were led into the dark by Cath. From there, these knights learned life drain and became enemies of mankind and any being with a soul. Their threat grew so severe that New Londo was flooded to seal them away in the abyss. That makes them one of the most extreme examples of a knight order in Dark Souls. They did not fail in ordinary war. They crossed into an entirely different allegiance and became part of a catastrophe so dangerous that an entire city was sacrificed to contain them. The Heide Knights. The Heide Knights belong to one of the clearest surviving echoes of Anor Londo's old culture. Heide's Tower of Flame carries visual and religious traces of the Age of the Gods, and the lore points toward Heide's founders having once served Gwyndolin and his covenant. The knights still possess cracked blue-eye orbs, worn remnants of the tools once used by the Darkmoon servants of Anor Londo. Their armor is described as ancient and nearly crumbling, which gives them the feel of a forgotten holy order that has outlived its own age. In Dark Souls 2, they sit silently until provoked, as if they are relics waiting in the ruins of a dead civilization. They are not framed as a thriving military force. They are the remains of an old sacred order whose meaning has nearly been erased by time. The Old Knights. The Old Knights, also called Sentinel Knights, are another ancient force tied to Heide. They stand outside the Cathedral of Blue and throughout Heide's Tower of Flame, massive, slow, and heavily armored. The lore around them is less detailed than that of the Heide Knights, but their placement matters. They are positioned like monumental guardians, as if they are part of the city's old sacred infrastructure rather than ordinary soldiers. Their presence in Drangleic Castle in Scholar of the First Sin also reinforces the idea that they are older than the current age and persist as relic guardians across later kingdoms. The Alonne Knights. The Alonne Knights served the old Iron King. Their name came from Sir Alonne, the Eastern swordsman who helped the king rise to power and later departed. Even after Alonne left, the king named his knights after him. That detail says a lot about the role Sir Alonne played in shaping the kingdom's military identity. The Alonne Knights defended the Iron Keep from intruders and continued that duty even after disaster consumed the kingdom. When the castle sank into lava and the old Iron King became a demon, the order did not disappear. They kept guarding the fortress and the ruins of the realm. That gives them a very Dark Souls kind of fate, a disciplined military order that survives the death of both its founder and its kingdom, carrying on its duty after the world that created it has already burned away. The Drakeblood Knights. The Drakeblood Knights are one of the most distinctive orders in Dark Souls 2 because their entire identity centers on dragons. They worship dragon blood and believed that acquiring fresh dragon blood would reveal a truer understanding of life. Led by Sir Jorg, they launched a siege against the Eternal Sanctum in Shulva, the Sunken City, in pursuit of sin. They killed the Sunken King and pierced the sleeping dragon, which unleashed a deadly poison over the city and destroyed nearly everyone there. The Order's faith, armor, and weapons all reflect this obsession. Their red cloth symbolized sacred dragon blood, and the script on their swords pointed to the same belief. They were not dragon slayers in the Gwyn tradition. They were seekers of dragon blood, and that pursuit turned them into invaders whose ambition helped destroy an entire hidden kingdom. The Loyce Knights. The Loyce Knights served Ilium Loyce and the Burnt Ivory King. Their kingdom existed to contain the old chaos beneath the land. That role gave the Order a duty larger than ordinary castle defense. They were guardians standing between their world and a second eruption of the chaos that had once destroyed Izalith. A group of these knights, led by Sir Fabian, descended into the depths to destroy the creatures of chaos. They failed, were corrupted, and became charred black, burning in agony beside their king. The surviving knights of Ilium Loyce stayed behind in the frozen city, waiting for a leader to guide them into the final battle. This order is one of the clearest examples of knightly sacrifice in the series. Their entire story is about containment, descent, corruption, and one last charge into a threat far older than their own kingdom. The Lothric Knights. The Lothric Knights are the military face of one of the last great kingdoms in the series. Their deeper roots go back to the old knights of Lothric, who rose in a land full of wyverns and built their identity around dragon slaying. They adopted the influence of Gwyn's firstborn, learned lightning techniques used against dragons, and eventually gained the knowledge to hunt and even ride wyverns. By the time of Dark Souls 3, the present Lothric Knights are the former guardians of the royal family and castle walls. Their kingdom is already collapsing, and many of them have become violent hollows still patrolling their posts. That makes them a late-age mirror of many earlier knight orders. They began in organized state power, dragon war, and royal service, and they ended as hollow sentries guarding a kingdom that can no longer save itself. The Cathedral Knights. The Cathedral Knights, also called the Knights of the Deep, are tied to one of the darkest religious institutions in Dark Souls 3. Their job was to defend the Cathedral of the Deep from intruders and from the abominations created within it. That second duty matters because it shows what kind of place the cathedral had become. These were not ordinary church guards protecting holy ground. They were stationed around a site that had become corrupted by the deep and by the brutal rituals tied to cleansing and confinement. Their shields also connect them to old Lothric royalty, and identical knights appear in the consumed king's garden, wearing the blue colors associated with the royal family's guard. That suggests the order grew from older royal service and was later redirected into the cathedral's grim purpose. In other words, they stand at the overlap between royal authority, religious duty, and corruption. The Winged Knights. The Winged Knights belong to the strange, angelic faith that appeared in Lothric. Their armor description states that they swore allegiance to the angels, and that this worship was considered heresy in Lothric, unrecognized by any of the three pillars. Gertrude, called the Angel's Daughter, was imprisoned in the Grand Archives because of this belief. The Winged Knights continued to patrol Lothric and its castle even after the kingdom began to fail, and Gertrude's most loyal knights later developed large feathered wings and remained near her resting place. Their weapons also reflect the harshness of their role, with twin axes described more like executioner tools than standard knight arms. So this order is important because it shows a religious movement taking knightly form inside a decaying kingdom. They are not tied to the old dragon-slaying tradition of Lothric. They belong to a later and more unstable faith that grew inside the cracks of the kingdom's collapse. The Outrider Knights. The Boreal Outrider Knights are one of the clearest examples of a knight order being used as an instrument of control. These were former warriors of Irithil who were given Sullivan's eye rings before being dispatched on foreign campaigns. Those rings drove them into violent frenzy through visions of endless combat, and over time, they lost their sanity and became mindless servants. The process also changed their bodies, leading them toward beast-like forms. Sullivan used them as loyal exiles, troops with no stable future outside obedience. Fort and the Dancer are the most famous figures tied to this order. In their case, the title of knight still exists, but the function of knighthood has been emptied out. The Abyss Watchers. The Abyss Watchers are the core of the Undead Legion of Farron. They are not a royal knight order in the old sense, yet they operate as one of the most important knightly forces in Dark Souls 3. Their entire identity is modeled after Artorias. They took inspiration from the Wolf Knight, adopted his fighting style, and partook of wolf blood to inherit his legacy. That made them a special force dedicated to hunting the Abyss wherever it appeared. Their combat style reflects this shared blood and shared mission because they fight like a coordinated pack. At some point, they became Lords of Cinder, which means their order rose high enough to take part in the central ritual of preserving the Age of Fire. Their collapse is equally important because by the time the player reaches them, the Legion has turned inward and is locked in endless mutual slaughter, still trying to destroy corruption even after its own order has broken apart. The Ringed Knights. The Ringed Knights are among the oldest knight groups in the series. They fought alongside Gwyn in the war against the dragons, yet their efforts were never properly recognized or commemorated. Because of their closeness to the dark and the nature of their equipment, the gods branded them with a seal of fire. Even so, they continued to serve. That makes them different from later knight orders whose fall came from corruption, hollowing, or political collapse. The Ringed Knights were marked from the beginning by a tension between service and suspicion. They were useful to the gods and feared by the gods at the same time. By the era of the Ringed City, they survive as ancient remnants at the edge of the world, carrying one of the oldest unresolved truths in Dark Souls, that the history of the gods was built with the help of warriors who were never fully accepted into that history. If you like this video, please like and subscribe for more Dark Souls lore explained. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.